My name is Rene LaBelle. I'm your host tonight for the third Tuesday of the odd month. Thank you all very much for coming. Just quickly, is anybody here for the very first time? Thank you. Welcome. Can you please tell me how you found out about the event?
When I attended the UT Symposium in August, I found out about these.
Fantastic. Well, welcome. How did you find out about it?
I think I signed up for emails a bit back, so I was interested in this one.
Great. Well, and our speaker tonight, they have a terrific website that you may know about. So they actually promote this event. So that's really helped. As you know, or may not know, the UT Dallas Project Management Program is the sponsor of this event. They pay for the pizza. If you were kind enough to fill out the form when you arrived, you know, Kathy will claim your PDUs. So it's pretty slick. So please tell all your friends. We like it that you tell other people. And the one thing that I would like to bring to your attention is that for already close to 4 years now, all of these all of these third Tuesday of the odd month have been recorded. And so it's a very easy way for you to get PDUs and just do a self-reporting. And I know that people are watching those videos because I was in Aldi the other day and the guy said, "Hey, I saw you on the video." So, and that was the first verification of somebody actually watching the videos. But I mean, it's a really great resource, and it's really working quite well. I think I've covered all the housekeeping issues. I wanted to present our speaker. Oh, did you have a question?
Yes, sorry. So you
Yes.
were saying about the recordings, but are they going to go back and put them in the categories that he's getting ready to talk about, so we'd be able to claim them in the right categories?
Can you send me an email on that? It's a fantastic idea, but I mean, I can't answer the question, but if you send me an email, do you have my email address? Rene LaBelle? No? Rene@labelle.com? LEBEL.com? RENE, just RENE at labelle.com. But yeah, that's a fantastic suggestion. I think there was a question over here too. No? Oh, over here, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
So you said the recordings are like the backlogs, we can go back and watch?
Absolutely. There's approximately 4 years, so that's...
Is it under the UTD website or is it stored elsewhere?
If you Google Applied Project Management Forum, UT Dallas, you'll come to our webpage and you'll see previous presentations, and there's a link in there, and you shouldn't be too hard to find the videos, and there's quite a long list of them. Some of them are really fantastic. I would recommend them all, but some are really fantastic. Anyways, to move on to tonight's speaker, I'm absolutely delighted that Larry is going to be our speaker. As you know, he's our president. Hooray. We're all PMPs, right? So thank you, Mr. President, for coming to this evening's event. Larry is a PMP. He is also a Plano guy, so he grew up in the Dallas area. And he is an avid reader, and so I quizzed him. I said, "So you read all of the PMI literature?" And he confessed, no, he does not read all the PMI literature. But I would like to welcome Larry. Thank you very much for...
Thanks, Renee. Okay, thank you guys for having me. So I did see just about everybody raise their hand when they said they've got a PMP, or you hold at least one of the PMI certifications. Does anybody hold more than one PMI certification? Okay, so I do have one slide, which probably only you will care about, unless some of you are planning on getting multiple PMI certifications, but I'll save that one for last. The other thing is, feel free to ask questions throughout. A couple caveats. Go ahead and ask questions. In some cases, you may ask a question that will involve me answering via my opinion rather than facts. If that's the case, I'll let you know it's my opinion, and it does not necessarily reflect the opinions of PMI and or the PMI Dallas chapter, because they are my own and sometimes do differ from what PMI would like us to say. The other caveat that I was going to think about was, well, I got allergies, and those are bothering me today, so you might have to excuse me a couple times. All right, well, other than that, we'll get started right away. We're just going to go through this. I'll talk about the continuing certification program just from a high level, just kind of the general purpose of it, and then we'll talk about the changes, the new talent triangle, kind of what's driving that. And, oh, the other caveat I was going to remember, even myself as the president of the PMI Dallas chapter, we have not gotten all the information on the changes that PMI plans to roll out. So I'm hoping I can answer all your questions. But like I was just reviewing the material they've sent out to us even last night, and they've said, you know, more stuff is forthcoming. So they've really only given us a couple presentations. And then we'll go over some details on the continuing certification requirements. And then if you're nice, at the end, I'll walk you through how to get all the PDs you need for free, counting. Although it's going to change a little bit with the new program, but counting this, right? Because you guys do this, what, every odd months, right? So 6 a year? So 6 a year, so you can get 6 right here, okay. All right, so the purpose of the CCR program, the Continuing Certification Program, it's fourfold. And you can read all of these. I'm going to talk about the one that I think is the most important to me, and I'll talk about that in a little bit greater detail. And for me, it's the really the enhanced professional development. I don't know about in your career, but in my career, I've noticed that organizations spend a lot less on training me now than they used to. And generally, that's not just, I'm in the IT space. That's not just IT, but that's kind of all across the board. And I mean, we know more and more organizations are putting off the training and development of their employees onto the employee. They're not taking those costs anymore. They're expecting you to do it. So you, in order to stay relevant, to stay employed, to compete with a growing international market, right? So, you know, a lot of jobs are getting outsourced. You have to be constantly adding to your skill set, improving it, changing it as the market changes. So the CCR program really is one way to encourage you to invest in that, your own education. Some organizations are still pretty good about it, but a lot are not. So, and for me, it's one thing, even though, you know, you'd think, as president of the PMI Dallas chapter, I'm just printing money and job offers like crazy. That is not necessarily the case. And it is something I'm constantly going out and reading new books, industry stuff, taking classes myself, things like that, because I'm focused on my own career growth, or really just maintaining. And frankly, I'm sure, you know, 15 years ago, there were tons of mainframe developers that were saying, oh, no, I'm good. I'm golden, right? Nobody, right? And there's still mainframes out there. Pepsi still has them, as a matter of fact. But they're not as many as they used to be. So you really need to be working on your skills. And that's really the purpose of the program. The other thing is, I think, and from PMI's perspective, is they want to make sure that companies continue to see a value in certified project managers, and that those that don't already are already aware of the value are going to see the value. And if, you know, the people that have those certifications continue to improve their skills and hone their skills, then that'll be the case. I'm going to try to move around not very much because I know it causes problems for the camera guys. Normally I'm all over the place, but okay. So why update the program? So the program, at least as long as I've been a project manager, has been relatively the same, where mostly the PDUs were counted by how they were delivered. So if you did, so giving back to the profession is one, and that would break down to, you could write a paper, you could do a presentation like this, you could be a practicing project manager. There was also, you know, seminars, classes, you could go to graduate school, anything like that, right? And so the categories were broken down by how they were delivered. So you needed this many hours in giving back to the profession and this many hours in formal education. And while all those methods of delivery are still available, that's just not how they're categorizing the hours of the PDUs anymore, right? They're more categorizing them by, well, the primary categorization is by this new talent triangle, which I'll go over in a second. And so what's driving that is the evolution of the profession. Number one, and PMI has been doing this survey with people that hire companies that hire project managers for a number of years, and they've been getting the consistent comments is have been that the technical expertise of a project managers are really, really hard to find, but they're easy to train, right? So if you guys have been out in the job market or if you worked with recruiters or anything like that, every employer is going to tell you, man, it's hard to find qualified people. Well, I know a ton of qualified people that are always on the market, right? So there's a big disconnect there. But what the companies have been telling, or the employers have been telling PMI for a long time is that the technical skills are often hard to find, but they're the easiest to train. The real gaps are in the business and strategy and in the leadership, right? And those three pieces are really what make up the talent triangle. And companies more and more, organizations more and more are expecting their PMs not to just come in and deliver tasks, essentially not just to come in and perform the technical pieces of being a project manager, right? They're expecting the project managers to understand the business more. So if you work for a particular business in a particular industry, they expect you to understand that industry a little bit, understand the business. They also want you to be aligned with the strategy. They want project managers more and more to not only are they doing projects right, but are they doing the right projects? And are they informing their internal customers their personal opinion based on their expertise on whether or not this is the right project to do? And in my experience, again, project managers are in a very unique position to provide that information. Because if I'm so I'm in IT, so I will tend to talk in IT terms, but it applies anywhere. So if I'm a network manager at a particular company, I understand network and I understand that tower really, really well, right? But the project manager, even though you may be working on, let's say, an infrastructure project or a network project, you're also working typically with who the customer of the network is. Maybe it's an application owner. Maybe it's a business owner, right? Because the business owners need they need the network to be running correctly, right? So project managers and a few other professions tend to be a very good intersection point for multiple, really what you would call verticals in the different organizations or multiple areas in the organizations. And the project managers I've worked with in the past, they tend to have a very good understanding of sort of where these things intersect, right? So it actually puts you, if you're paying attention, into a very unique position to understand the strategy of the organization and how the projects that you're working on can address the strategy. So I talked about organizations are challenged to find talent with the right skills. PMI they do a couple of surveys. They do the Pulse of the Profession every year, which talks more about typically organizational maturity around project management. And they also do it's basically an employment survey. They don't always do it every year. They do it pretty regularly. And that's really what comes out of that, is that the challenges that organizations are having with finding the right people. And again, it's typically in these three areas, right? Technical, business and strategy, and leadership. Technical, they have trouble finding those people, but it's really easy to learn, right? Or it's easier to teach. The goal is that the change to the program will make it a better professional development tool because we're focused on those key areas as opposed to just focusing on how the PDUs are delivered, right? They're focused on the actual content of the education units, right? So it's not just are you taking a class or coming to see somebody speak, but is it on some technical skills? Is it on business skills? Is it on leadership? It is, so historically it's been very self-directed. It's still self-directed, but before it was no real guidance on what types of things you had to take, right? It could be very free form. It could be anything related to project management. It was very wide open. Whereas this, under the new format, and you'll see it in a little bit, there's a little bit more direction, not a ton. And then we talked about increasing the value and the relevance to and the credibility of practitioners already. So right there's your first example of the triangle. I already talked about it a little bit. Technical project management, leadership, strategic and business management. And I'll get into what those mean, what they mean, the details here in a little bit. So what's changing? So the incorporation of the talent triangle, PMI has been talking about this for a couple of years. Mark Langley, the president, CEO of PMI, has been talking about it. He's been calling it the new triple constraint, right? We're all project managers, we're all familiar with the traditional triple constraint, but he's been talking about this as the new triple constraint for project managers. And I've kind of already beaten up that about. So alignment of PDUs to the talent triangle. There are limitations in certain categories, and we'll get into the details on this. You are now going to be required to have what they call, the education PDUs are the ones that are focused on these three legs of the PMI, the talent triangle, and there's a minimum number required in those areas. Whereas before, you had minimums in sort of the broad categories, but not something specific from an education perspective. And then minimums in each aspect of the talent triangle. And then now there's a maximum number of hours that you can get in the giving back to the profession area. So we'll go over those in details. When it's changing, December 1st, 2015, that's when a lot of stuff, and we'll go over how that affects you based on when you're due for recertification, et cetera. I'll go over that in a later slide. But this is the big date, December 1 this year. That's when all the changes will sort of flip over. Any questions so far? Anything? No? Okay. All right. So I saw most of you are already PMPs. I did put up the ones for the 30 PDU requirement. Some of the certifications require only 30 PDUs every three-year cycle. And those are up here as well, just to show you how it's different. So if you do have the ACP or the RMP or the SP, you'll see how they break down. So I talked a little bit about the minimums for the education requirement. So again, in these three particular tiers, technical, leadership, business, strategic, you are required to get them a minimum of 35 in those areas, and then a minimum of 8 in each area individually. So moving forward, you are going to be able to, so the business strategic is going to be really interesting. And when I talk about the 3 different tiers, we'll talk a little bit about that. But so you're required to get at least 8 in each one of the 3, technical, leadership, biz, strategic, and then giving back with a minimum of 35. And giving back, you can cap at a maximum of 25. So the most number you can credit yourself in giving back is 25, whereas before it was a lot higher. And then only 8 of those are for the PMP are for working as a professional. That's the new maximum. It used to be 15, right? Every 3-year cycle. Starting next year, it'll be 8. And with a maximum of 20. So giving back to the profession, again, is stuff like putting on a presentation, writing an article book, working as a PM professional. And then if you also have one of the 30 PDU certifications, you can see they're reduced there as well. All right. Okay, what's staying the same? Cost of renewing the certification. So most of this information came out of one whole slide that they sent me, or a presentation that they sent me. And then I was reading another deal that was actually dedicated to registered education providers, not components like the PMI Dallas chapter. And they just kind of on an aside said, well, the cost isn't going to change. I was like, well, that's going to be the thing that most everybody's going to ask about the most, right? Is that the price isn't going up. So I added it and I put it at the top. The other things that aren't going to change really are the measurement of the PDUs. It's still 1 hour of activity, so you're going to be here for roughly an hour. You get 1 PDU for that. The outlet opportunities, those haven't changed. I've talked a little bit about those already. So if you are a volunteer in any capacity as a project manager, that can be for the PMI Dallas chapter. It can be volunteering to run a project for your local charity, your religious organization, your community, anything like that. Those all count. We talked about creating knowledge already, working as a professional. We talked about how that got reduced. Continuing education, formal education classes. That can be master's degree in project management. It can be certification classes, any number of formal education. The flexibility that you have as far as how it gets delivered, right? So you can do virtual classes, you can do reading, you can do in-person classes. So there's not a restriction to you have to take 24 hours in classroom instruction, right? So how it's delivered, the timing of it is still very, very flexible. And then the CCR requirements for each certification, those don't change, right? So it's still 60 hours every 3 years for your PMP, right? And then the ones that are 30 hours are still 30 hours. Those don't change. Everybody okay so far? All right. Okay. So we'll go through I'll go through the next 3 slides, and those are on the particular legs. So just to explain, so the technical, so this is specific, knowledge and skills related to the job, specifically related to the job. How to do a WBS, risk registers, a lot of the stuff we really learned like studying for our PMP, right? requirements gathering. So anything related to what I would consider the technical aspects of being a project manager as compared to, say, the technical aspects of being a programmer, right, where it's actually coding. This is the nuts and bolts of being a project manager. Developing a schedule, communication plans, WBS, requirements gathering, risk registers, any of those components, right? So, the technical PDUs, those are going to compare by the PDU certification. I've got a chart, or PMI certification. I have a chart here that'll break it down for you. But for example, let's say you were taking a class on, or a seminar on project/portfolio management, and you spent 2 hours talking about risk registers, or how to handle risk assessment. You could apply that to, and you had both the portfolio and the project management certification, you could apply that 2 hours to both, right? So it would apply to, and it would apply to the technical, to that technical hours that you have to report for education, right? So if you had, let's say you had an 8-hour class on project portfolio management, and 6 hours was leadership, and the other 2 hours was managing, developing a WBS, right? The 2 hours of that would go, out of the 8 hours would go to technical, and then the 6 hours could be worked towards leadership, to report it toward leadership. Does that make sense? I got another chart here that'll break it down in a second. Okay, strategic business management. So we talked a little bit about this. So knowledge of and expertise in industry or organization that enhances performance and better delivers the business outcomes. This is the one I think is going to be interesting for PMI to measure, right? So if I'm working for, let's say, a consumer packaged goods manufacturing company, right? Well, the PMI Dallas chapter or any of the registered education providers, or probably UT Dallas, organizations like that, they're probably not going to offer classes in managing projects for consumer packaged goods industry. I'm just going to throw that out there. I mean, maybe we will, maybe we won't. We have had, at the Dallas chapter, we've had people from the oil and gas industry, bless you, come and things like that. So there's a little bit on that, which would be great for the people who attend the PMI Dallas meetings who are in the oil and gas industry, right? So you can count that business aspect, but probably not as hot for the other people. So since they do require 8 hours in strategic and business management, I'll be really interested to see how many people report, I got 8 hours in business project management education around consumer packaged goods, or whatever industry you might be in, transportation, things like that. Certainly you can take classes, but I have not seen an official designation on how I would report. Let's say if I went and took a class that was really just focused on the industry, the transportation industry, logistics industry. Well, if it's not focused on, historically, if it's not focused on project management, you don't get PDUs for it. But now but it's aligned to business and understanding the business better, so I should be able to get PDUs on it. But I haven't seen anything official from PMI on how that's going to work. So once we hear that, I'm sure you'll know. So PDUs in this category, they can be shared across PMI certifications. So again, if you are taking a class on some particular business aspect or strategy concept, and you hold both a portfolio management certification, for example, and a PMP certification, then you can use those hours and apply that to both certifications. So it's not like you have to get 8 hours and then go back and do another 8 hours for the portfolio certification. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
So do they have to be in the field practicing it currently?
Yes, I will repeat the question. Thank you for reminding me to do so. Do they have to be in the field in which you are practicing currently? That is a question I do not know the answer to. I would guess not necessarily, right? Because maybe it's a field that you were in before, maybe it's a field that you're wanting to go into. So again, to me, that would apply. But since they haven't really given me a determination yet on how am I going to report, again, if I go take a class on manufacturing efficiencies in the consumer packaged goods industries, let's say, as an example, and that's just because I worked in that space for a little while, right? So I'm learning about the business, right? I'm learning about business management in a field, at least where I have worked in the past, but it may not necessarily, And again, I may do a project that is about manufacturing efficiencies, improving manufacturing efficiencies. So based on their new criteria, it should apply, right? I'm understanding the business better, so I can understand how the projects I work on apply to that business. So it should count, but it's not specifically geared towards project management. Does that make sense? And since I haven't heard definitively on how that's going to work, I don't know the answer to that question. But I will check. And then I don't know, Renee, will there be like an email distribution list where we can update everybody on the answers to these questions? Yeah? Okay. So you guys are going to have to pardon me for just a second. I'm going to take a note. All right. Any other questions around that? Yes, sir.
So, I just hear.
Oh, yeah. Renee's going to try to walk the mic over.
So would it be easier for the PMI Dallas chapter, for instance, to classify each one of their events as to which category they could be applied?
We are going to be expected, all education providers are going to, should be classifying their PDUs that they offer by one of these. Again, I was reading the actual documentation they sent out to the registered education providers, and that seemed to indicate that we're not like obligated, like contractually obligated to do it, but it releases the burden off of you, right? So if let's say, as the Dallas chapter president, if we offer a presentation and I don't mark it as leadership, because we do a lot of leadership ones, but I don't mark it as leadership, and then you go to register your PDU, then that puts the onus on you to register it as a leadership PDU. Whereas if I pre-categorize it and put it in and say, okay, well, it's leadership, we're doing this presentation, it's based on leadership, and it's already categorized. When you go register your PDU, boom, it just goes through to leadership. The other thing is, at least for us, we try to register PDUs for the people that attend our regular dinner meetings. And so, again, it's going to be something that I'm going to have to categorize it as a PDU. Now, again, for me, that's a challenge because historically, 1 hour PDUs, we don't enter into the reporting system. So just this is probably logistics that nobody even cares about, but when you're offering PDUs, right, through PMI, you go in and register. Let's say if I've got a 4-hour class, for example, and I'll go in and create that class in PMI system and register whatever it is, create the name, the title, the date. And then that way, when you take the class, you want to go in and report it, you can go in and find it. You can look up PMI Dallas chapter, happened on this date, was this title, boom, you can find it, pull it out, and enter it. Well, historically, for the 1 and 2 PDUs, we haven't done that. We haven't gone and created a code because PMI hasn't required that you actually reference the specific, like, again, for the PMI Dallas chapter, you just go, I went to the July, PMI Dallas chapter dinner meeting, it's 1 hour, PDU, boom, done. But with this change, then I think that's going to be a lot more overhead on our part. And I would expect most of your registered education providers are providing longer than one PDU courses, 4 or more typically. So they'll hopefully, I'm not guaranteeing that they're going to do this for you, but they should be saying I'm providing a class on technical project management. Right, so it should be registered, so you'll know how you're getting those hours beforehand, and you shouldn't have to classify them. And then to the question that Renee got beforehand, if you guys were going to go, if they were going to go and back and update those, we'll get to this slide in just a second, but hours that you collect between now and December the 1st don't have to be registered under the old PDU category or under the new PDU category. Does that make sense? So this one today, let's say if you go in and you check it in today as I got my PDU today, starting December, let's say 15th, you don't have to go back and say, okay, this class was on technical project management. I don't even know how this one would be categorized, but technical project management, you don't have to categorize that. Prior to that the December 1st date, you don't have to categorize them. Post December 1, they have to fall into this categorization. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
But what about if you're exceeding the limit for each one of those categories prior to December 1st?
I would advise you to yes. So let's say you've already got 10 in strategic and business management, right? Yeah, I would go ahead and check those off because then that way, after December 1st, you've already got that minimum that you need to meet. Does that make sense? I would do that. You had a question? Oh, I did? Okay, good. Okay. Anything else?
Larry, I had a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in my case, my recertification started May of this year. I still continue next year under the old regime, or I start the new regime in December?
So any hours you accumulate between now and December are under the old path, right? And then moving forward. But I think, and I've got a chart that breaks this down. So we'll go through it in detail because there's a point where, based on where you are in your research cycle, the minimums for this certification research time period don't apply. They won't really apply until your next research cycle, but it's based on like how far in you are to the recertification, and that's why I have a chart, so I don't have to remember all the details. Anything else on this? No? Okay. Okay, leadership. Knowledge, skills, and behavior specific to leadership-oriented skills. So this is around motivation, communication, organizational leadership, things like that. So all your sort of touchy-feely leadership stuff. This one is where PMI Dallas chapter has historically done a lot of classes. Again, the business management stuff I think is pretty hard to figure out because it's going to vary from industry to industry. Same thing as with the business. PDUs in this category can be shared across PMI certifications. So if you go take a class that's specific, let's say an 8-hour class on leadership, and you hold both the RCP and the PMP, right? You can apply those hours to both, right? Because both require leadership. Any questions on that? All right. Okay, here's the chart, Renee, that you were talking about. So beginning on December 1 of 2013, so classify PDUs according to the new CCR program. So based on your certification date, starting in December of this year, you will need to, starting in December, you'll need to classify PDUs according to the new program, right? So you don't need to worry about it prior to December 1, but post December 1, you'll need to focus on it. And so you can see how they have it broken down based on your current expiration date. So if it's between now and November 2017, and then post. All right. So if your if your certification expires between now, well, essentially December 1, 2015, and the 30th of November 2017, you do not need to meet it should be PDU, minimums in education categories for each of the 3 skill areas. Remember we talked about the 3, and you had to have 8 for the PMP. You had to have 8 in each one. So if your certification expires between now and 2017, then you don't need to meet the minimum categories this certification cycle, but the next one you'll start having to meet them at new minimums. That make sense? Okay. And then the giving back. Same thing, right? So right now we have a much higher limit on the giving back to the profession, but with the new certification, they're going to cap it at 25. So again, if your certification expires before November 30th, 2017, you do not have to, you don't have the lower cap. And that applies also for the how many PDUs you get for being a practicing project manager, right? So you can still count 15. Any questions around that chart? Yes, sir. No, he's going to take that. You got to wait. You got to wait for the mic.
I belong to the column on the right there. So I have about 20 PDUs that I carried over from the previous cycle. Mm-hmm. So my question is, how do I classify them, into new categories?
So the ones that you've already got, right, the ones that you carried over from your last cycle, you don't have to classify them. Right?
But I still have to meet the minimum in each area, right?
That's true.
3 skill areas. So that's where the challenge comes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what you would have to do, my guess is because of the age of them, nobody's going to go back and, I don't know who provided them, but if you can dig out which ones they are, you can go back and classify them yourself. The other thing is too, though, really, if you're carrying 20 over, you only need to get, you have to get at least 8 from each of the other 3 categories, so that's 24. So you still need to acquire 40 more PDUs. So at least 24, are going to need to be categorized anyway. So it might be worthwhile to just not worry about the old ones and just focus on the new ones that you're getting and making sure those meet the classifications, just from a work effort perspective. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of, thanks.
Okay. Anything else? No? Oh, so I was talking a little bit about how you can apply the hours across the different certifications. And so here's kind of where it gives a breakdown. So you can see, let's say if you take it, for example, and I won't go through the whole chart. We'll go through the most complex one on the end, and then you guys can look at the other one. You take an 8-hour PM course, and then an hour of it is on requirements, 1 hour is on risk mitigation, you have 30 minutes on schedule and 30 minutes against Agile, right? So you see you can apply the full 8 hours against both the PMP and the PGMP if you hold these two certifications. And then you can apply that half hour you got on Agile to the ACP, the half hour you got on schedule, and then the 1 hour for both the PBA and then the RMP for the requirements stuff. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's between this one, how you apply them across, because I only hold one certification myself, this is the PMP. So I had never even really, before I saw this, thought through, like if I take a class, if I had multiple certifications and I took a class, like how does that apply? And so I started looking at it, I was like, well, again, because I only hold one, it never really had occurred to me. And nobody's ever asked me before how I apply those across. Any questions? Yep, yes ma'am.
In the example, it says 0.50, that means 30 minutes of Agile class only applicable to the PMI ACP certification.
Yeah.
But the requirement collection also happen in Agile project management.
That is a good point.
And evaluating risks in Agile project management too. So
yeah, that's a good point.
PMI ACP should get some credit.
I would agree with you on that one. But again, this chart came right out of PMI. This is exactly the one. But I mean, what I would do is probably submit it anyway, under that. I mean, and then, if they audit you, I think you can make a really good justification for, well, look, we do. I'm not an Agile guy. I mean, I understand it obviously from a high level, but you're right. You do requirements, you do risk, right? It's not like those things don't happen in Agile. So yeah, I agree with you. That would totally apply. Now, but those would be technical pieces. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I agree. So you can always just tell them, hey, Larry said. We'll see how far that gets you. There's a few people at the home office that know my name, but I think they probably say it in not nice references, to be honest with you. So, any other questions on this chart? It's a little bit challenging to follow. That was the last one, because that was the one about the multiple certifications. So I will answer any other questions. I'll answer. It doesn't have to be about this. It can be about anything else, PMI Dallas related. Oh, you guys were nice, so I promised I would give you how to get all your PDUs without ever spending a dollar. I think some of the other presidents of the other chapters think I'm cutting my own throat for saying this. But honestly, from my viewpoint, my job really isn't to deliver PDUs, it's to deliver education. The PDUs are a byproduct, and so hopefully if we're offering good product, you guys will come out, regardless of whether you get a PDU for it or not. But so I already talked about this, right? And I'm going to try to do it. The math was really easy in my head because I've done it a bunch of times under the old program, but I'll try to do it under the new one, right? So you get on the new program, you get 8 hours for being a practicing project manager every 3 years. So that's now you only need 52 after that, right? And you can get 6 a year from here, right? So that's 24. So that's 32 out of the 60. That's 28, and they're all free. That's 28 left. Right. So you get 6. Sorry, my math is really bad. 6 times 3 is 18, right? 6 times 3 is 18 plus 8 is 24, right? So you get 24. That's 24 for free. I just told you how to get, right? So that leaves only 36 more to go. All right. So there are a lot of websites. There are podcasts that you can get. right? There are webinars online, there's YouTube channels. So you can get the rest of those. You can read a book, right? So you can read a book or read multiple books, and that will get you more PDUs as well. And because they're not limited on how you deliver it, right? You could read a book on Agile project management. You could read a book on, and that's a 1-for-1. However many hours you spend reading the books, that's a PDU, right? If you write an article for a local paper or on project management or for any organization, then that's PDUs, right? So you don't ever have to spend money, as Becca can tell you, by coming to a PMI Dallas chapter meeting to get your PDUs, right? So it's actually really, really easy. I think, now don't get me wrong, I think you guys all should come to the PMI Dallas chapter meetings. I think we put on really good meetings. There's networking, which I think is by far the most valuable thing that we do, right? And I think we do have good programs. But I resist the temptation to say that you should have to spend a lot of money to do it. It costs me money to get PDUs, just as it does everybody else. So there are actually several really, really good podcasts out there that I keep downloaded onto my phone. They're focused on project management. I'll be interested to see how they categorize them under the new categories, right? If they're actually proactively doing that, and so that it's really easy for you to figure them out and see what they go to. But there you go. So you don't really even need to spend any money. Yes, sir.
When you watch,
Let's do here. I'll come over in a second.
Oh, sorry.
When you talk about the triangle, are you able to take a class, for example, 8 hours, and then split it in between any of the sections, like leadership and perhaps
Yes.
business?
Yeah, if they have, if the class is broken up, you can break up the hours that you assign based on the content of the class, right? So if it's strategic management, leadership, and some technical management, so a little bit of all three, you can split it up as it's appropriate. If it's, let's say it's an 8-hour class, 4 hours strategic, 2 hours is leadership, and 2 hours is technical project management, then you can break it up that way, right? And again, as I showed on the chart before, or this chart, you can apply it, again, if it applies to multiple certifications, you can apply it appropriately, right? So you can count, if those 4 hours are strategic, and you need that both in your PGMP and your PMP, you can apply that 4 hours in both categories. Does that answer your question sufficiently? Yeah? Okay.
when you find these webinars or these presentations on the web, do they have to be provided or developed by a preferred education provider in order to count?
No, they do not. So the way, if they're multiple hours, right, if they're longer than a couple hours, it's easier to report it because they'll usually provide, if they're a provider, registered education provider, they'll provide a number, right? So like, as an example, all the registered education providers and all the components, we all get a designation number. So for Dallas, it's 004. So you get that number, and then there will be like another number appended to the end of that tells you specifically what that actual class was, so they could tie it back to a database, right? When you go in and enter it, you can like look up PMI Dallas chapter, you get our number, and then you look up for classes that were offered, let's say calendar year 2015, you'll see all the classes, and they'll have, all the big ones, they have numbers. So if they're already a registered education provider, then yeah, they're already proactively going through that process, so it's easy for you to find and for you to register. But it's not a requirement. So basically, any education that you get that's around project management counts as a PDU. So here's another way, I didn't mention this before, but you can get free PDUs. If you host during your lunch hour at work a facilitated, organized discussion around project management at your office, that's a PDU. When we did those, I know, I was just thinking that, we should have counted those as PDU. So Becca and I used to work at Pepsi together. And we used to have a group of project managers that used to get together, and we would talk about basically the project management process, in quotes, right, that we had at Pepsi, right, when we worked there. And it started out with just a couple of PMs, and then Becca got added on, and then it ended up being like a small group before I left. I don't know, are you guys still doing it? So, and it was maybe every week or every other week, just an hour, usually our lunch hour, and we would sit around and we would go through, we would help review each other's schedules or charters, or we would talk about specific challenges we were having, and those were all PDUs that we could have had, and I didn't even count it, and I didn't even think about that. So a facilitated discussion that's organized, even if it's structured by you, it can count as a PDU.
So I'm thinking about these other two, the leadership and the business strategy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, and I was just wondering how we could take advantage of the stuff that was out there, but they aren't affiliated with PMI, so they won't have the code numbers and
Yeah.
that kind of thing, because they're not a preferred provider.
Right.
So how do we report those then?
And that's going to be something I'm going to need to follow up on because, again, especially when you talk about leadership, now that they've gone to focusing on these three categories, right? And it applies as easily to leadership as it does to the business perspective, right? Is that, well, leadership is not strictly a project man, right? I mean, you can't say, well, I'm only going to take there's too many opportunities for you to take classes in leadership that aren't going to be structured strictly around project management. Does that make sense? Same thing with the business, right? So again, they're requiring that I go learn more about the businesses in which I'm working or want to work. And so if I go take that should apply, right? I need to learn. PMI has now said I must learn about business, about the specific industry in which I'm working. So I need to be able to categorize the requirements. I'm going to go ahead and take another note on that, and then I'll try to get it out. I know you know how to get me. So, but I'll make sure I try to get these questions answered. Becca, you want to go ahead, and while I'm taking a note.
So they're not just category threes like they used to be?
So they're not working, they don't have those same categories like they used to. Does that make sense? Like how they used to break them out like that? So you're going to have to categorize it as like a leadership class, or a class on leadership, or a class on business management, or a class on technical. But they used to break them down by, category A was, I think, PMI chapters are category A, right? So that's a component or a registered education provider. Category C was given back to the profession. I don't remember what they all were, but no, they're not breaking them out like that anymore. I mean, there's still be a little bit of that because you still have that giving back to the profession section. But again, the main focus really is on these education pieces, right? The leadership, the technical, and then the business.
So the form is just going to have the name and the date and the hours?
I don't know what the form's going to look like. They haven't shown me what that's going to look like yet, and they haven't rolled it out. So I'm hoping to get that here later in the year, but and see what the actual form will look like on the website. But they haven't shown us how that's going to be broken out. I can only make assumptions at that point. Becca?
If my company offers training in leadership that's tailored to their industry, do I claim the hours as leadership or business and strategic?
I would claim it as both because it applies to both. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I would do. But you'll really need, for that one in particular, you probably just need to check with PMI. Once it comes
So
out.
double dipping is possible then?
Well, so they've already outlined right here, right? You can double dip. I thought I had another chart on that one. Hold on. Did I not have
That's for
something?
different certifications, so not the same one.
So I think the appropriate way that they would break that out, right, is kind of how they broke it out here. Sorry, you guys, I wasn't looking at the mic. If it's leadership and business, my guess is not all 8 hours is leadership and business, right? You have to break it out and say some of it's leadership. Half of it was roughly leadership and half of it was specific business, let's say, and that's how I would break it out. So I would report 4 hours, whatever you think it makes sense. 4 hours is leadership and the other 4 hours is business. Renee, we got one over here.
Hillary, can you go back to the previous slide?
That one?
Yeah, so I have a question on giving back on the new requirement. So I think wait, can you go back to the previous one? Because I want to know about
Not this one. No?
Go back. I think it's in the beginning. Yes, right here. So right now I have 5 hours for working as a profession.
Okay.
And I'm planning on do some volunteer work before December. So that'll probably give me another 5. So after December 1st, am I maxed out already, or how does that work?
When does your certification
Expiration day?
expiration date?
2018.
2018.
Yeah, I just renewed in May of this year.
Okay, so you just renewed. So right? So your limit of giving back category is going to be under the new cap. But the cap's 25 on the giving back to the profession, right? So you said you've got 5 for being a practicing project manager, right? And you're going to do, let's say, 5 more for volunteer work. That's 10, but the new cap is 25. So you'll still have 15 more that you can accrue. Does that make sense? Yeah. Did that answer your question effectively? Yeah? Okay.
But as a profession, I'm capped at 8. That's it, right?
The new cap is 8. Yeah, it used to be 15, but the new cap's 8.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay,
Thanks.
good. I apologize, guys. This is a little bit of a dry subject. I wish I had something that was a little bit more engaging or I could get really passionate about, but it's kind of dry.
I think I have a similar question to him. So for me, so I would be able to, for 2 years, as a practicing project manager, claim the 5 and the 5. And then, so after December 1st, 2015, then like 8 is the limit. So I couldn't do it.
When's your certification renew?
Next October.
So in October of 2016? Yeah, so you don't have the cap. You're under the old cap, right, for this certification cycle, which is, right. So I
can still do 15?
Yeah, you can still do 15 for your,
for the working as a
for
professional?
the work, for the PMP, for being a practicing project manager.
Okay.
So in essence, if you are going to.
Just a sec, please. It's for the video.
So really, if your expiration date is before November 30th, 2017,
Yeah.
all you really have to do is make sure you categorize anything afterwards, and you're still under the same as we are right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
There's mud? Believe me, it was, the Dallas chapter, at least the leadership, we've been discussing how do we explain this since we first heard about it. So, any other questions?
Question right over here, okay.
So as a community, what are we going to do to make sure we get all of those categories? You have the symposium and these classes, and you have the chapter events.
Yeah. So we do, the PMI Dallas chapter, we do a lot of leadership, a lot of our leadership. Frankly, I don't think we do enough, as a Dallas chapter, historically, I don't think we do enough that's really like what I would call strictly technical project management skills. So for me, I think it's a really good opportunity for us, again, the PMI Dallas, just speaking as a president of the PMI Dallas chapter, I think it's a really good opportunity for us to reevaluate. And when I say technical, I mean that like to the general public. So we offer classes, but they're like 8-hour classes, and they're a couple $100. But as far as like our monthly dinner meetings, we don't have a lot of the monthly dinner meetings where it's just an hour and it's focused on again, technical project management skills. And so I think it's a good opportunity for us to reevaluate that and make sure that we're doing some offerings, at least in our regular, smaller, bite size, as opposed to sitting down taking 8 hours, smaller cost, and offering some stuff that's technical. Whereas again, the leadership is really easy because a lot of people want to sell you their leadership book or whatever, and so they want to come talk about it. Strategic, I think, is going to be pretty easy too, as well. Although I don't know of any registered education providers that are what I would consider offering strategic education focused on project management today. So I think it's a good opportunity, again, for the Dallas chapter to talk about that. Or organizations like UTD, let's say, that has an MBA program, a master's program in project management, where you would expect they have a strategic component in their master's program that talks about strategy. So I think it'd be a good opportunity for them in forums like this to provide some strategic, some strategic classes. The biz classes, I think, again, which I've already talked about, I think that's where the real challenge is going to be. As far as from a larger community, it's just like anything else, right? I mean, we're in a capitalist society, so it's demand, right? If there's a demand there, somebody's going to come in and fill the demand. I don't know, maybe it'll be me. I'm retiring from the PMI Dallas chapter here in about 6 months, so maybe I'll come start offering some biz classes on project management. Although I don't have a lot of specific business expertise outside of a couple of industries, but yeah, go ahead. I don't know. Have you guys has UTD started talking about what they're going to do under these new certifications.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to find out about this PMI Toastmaster meeting. That gives two PDUs. Where would you classify them? Leadership or communication?
I mean, I put that under leadership because communications, that kind of communications that you would do under the Toastmasters would be
It's
leadership.
2 tracks. You have communication and leadership in that program.
Right. Yeah.
But they cover the 9 areas of technical project management. So
Yeah.
if the speech is on, if the theme is risk, or if the theme is schedule, that's technical.
So if you guys didn't hear Becca, right? So if they're coming and they're doing a track or a the speech is on or the presentation is on something technical, and you're attending it and watching somebody else do it, then you could get the technical piece, right, as well. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Would you mind if I address the lady's question?
No, please go ahead.
Yeah. So let me just say, it wasn't my idea to have Larry come tonight, but as soon as I heard about it, I thought it was a great idea. And I think that the people behind me, I'm just a volunteer, but the people behind me are definitely aware that this is a big issue. And it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out exactly how to address it.
So is Zot the guy I have to blame for me coming up here? Is it Jim?
No, I think it's your nemesis, Debbie.
Oh, it is my official nemesis, Debbie. I was hoping she would be
This
here.
was Debbie's idea. No, but as soon as I heard about it, at first I said, "Why are they changing it?" I mean, it's like, well, change is the only constant. We all know that. But it's like, there must be a good reason. And I think that a lot of the sessions that we've had here over the years have addressed different parts of this. And I wouldn't say that. I mean, we can't go back and reverse engineer and say, oh, this one deals with that or this one deals with that. But going forward, it certainly should be something that should at least be kept in the back of our minds on how to deal with it. Well, and then in next year's symposium could be a little bit of a trial, and more and more people are going to be affected by this. It sounds like really nothing big happens until after 2017, right?
Yeah, so we did in the planning sessions for the PM Symposium, we did talk about, because this announcement came out and we were still kind of in the early planning stages for this year's symposium. We did talk about looking at kind of like for this round, identifying those. I think it was a little early for us, but definitely for next year, I think we'll definitely have to categorize them, and we may look at that. Maybe they're tracks we go next year. I don't know. We haven't even started talking about next year. And I will tell you, I know some of the other components, some of the other regional chapters, they've already started moving toward this. Again, the talent triangle is not really it's not a new concept this year to PMI, right? So Mark Langley, the CEO of PMI, he's been talking about, again, the new triple constraint, and he's been talking about those 3 topics, right, as the new triple constraint for a number of years, at least 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. So it's something that's already been on their radar, and I know some components they do. So the Talos chapter doesn't do this because we partner with UTD, but other chapters do what they call a professional development day. It's a similar concept. It's usually hosted by the chapter alone, and it's a single day, whereas we do a 2-day thing with UTD. And so I know some of the chapters, one in Virginia comes to mind. They already organized this year's PDD, again, which is similar to our PM Symposium, around these 3, technical, leadership, and business strategic. So some organizations are already moving to that. This is definitely something we'll all have to do if we want to be good stewards to our customers, I think.
Larry, I want to thank you very much for a great presentation.
Thank you guys very much. I'll stay for questions.
Yes, you're all welcome to stay for as long as you want.
I know Renee's got to go. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Juliet, you want to take over the mic for me, please?
Are you planning to offer PMI ACP test preparation class? I know you did PMP. I took that class.
Yeah.
It was really helpful.
Am I still on? Yeah, you can hear me okay? It is definitely on our radar. Unfortunately, we're an all-volunteer organization, so things in our organization take longer than they do even in regular organizations, right? So just imagine how long it takes to get something new in your company or wherever you work. Now apply that to an all-volunteer organization. It takes 10 times as long. We need to offer it. We need to offer something. There are some good Agile offerings in the area. I know there's they call themselves I forget. But there's a group, they're loosely affiliated with the PMI Dallas chapter of some, like a former board member who's involved in that. And if you look for like PMI Agile Dallas, they have a meetup page, and you can find, and they do something monthly, I think. And so you can go get some Agile stuff. But it's not a prep, it's not a certification prep exam. And we really don't do a PMP certification prep. So it's not like a full 36-hour education unit class. We do an 8-hour, we call it a PMP exam review, right? Yeah. So in my mind, we should be offering something around all the certifications that PMI offers. But especially, even if you talk to some of the registered education providers, the program and the portfolio management pieces, there's still not a lot of demand for those. And so a lot of the ones, the companies that are out there, there's really only a couple that are offering something in a prep for the portfolio and the program. And then obviously, there's all the other certifications, and then the PBA is so really new. I don't know if anybody knows what they're going to do about that yet. But from my perspective, the Dallas chapter should definitely be offering something that applies at least to each of those certifications. It may not be a full prep class. Those kind of prep classes really have not been sort of a core offering for the Dallas chapter, like doing a full 36-hour like you would get, let's say, for your PMP prep. We usually have been focused more on sort of the small, not really a prep class, but more of a review. And so I don't know, from an education perspective, whether or not we'll go with looking at a full prep or some sort of again, like an Agile test review class. But it's definitely on our radar. But unfortunately, I don't have a timeline I can give you on that one. Anything else? All right. Well, with that, I thank you guys very much for your time. I appreciate you staying.